My husband crippled me, he spilled oil on the stairs, and I slipped and broke both my legs. Suddenly, his messages popped up with phrases like, let him sit in the chair, it's easier for me to fill out paperwork. The oil was translucent against the wood, a subtle shimmer only visible in the right light. I know this because I stared at it while the pain tore at my legs from the inside, and the banister rattled as I struggled to catch it. My husband stood frozen above me, his phone in his hand, as if it were glued to his side. He didn't run. He didn't shout my name. He said very calmly, "Don't move. You could make it worse," and then took a picture of the stairs. At the hospital, he told a nurse, "She's 71 years old and she trips," as if age were a clumsy habit I refused to break. As they gave me the morphine and wheeled me past the vending machines, he leaned over and whispered, "We'll figure this out." He smelled like a garage. I thought the oil must have leaked from the lawnmower. I told myself my husband would never use our ladder as a weapon. 2 days later, my neighbor Iris came over with a casserole and a look on her face like she was hiding a secret. "You should have seen this," she said, placing her phone in my palm. On the screen was a group chat of neighbors, the same ones who peddle brands of leaf blowers and complain about property taxes like they're sports. Above the gray circles was my husband's name. "Let him sit in the chair. It's easier for me to fill out the paperwork." And then, "Slopes are tricky. One good miss, and Medicare will do the rest." So be it. Slopes, paperwork. "Is this a joke?" I asked Iris, though my heart already knew. She shook her head. "They always say that. I started saving screenshots after you fell." When my husband returned home, I was sitting in a chair, my legs in casts, my phone warm in my hand. "How's my little girl?" he asked, kissing my forehead. I looked at his shoes. No oil. He'd cleaned them up. "How did oil get on the stairs?" I asked. He blinked. "What oil?" "The oil I slipped on." "There was no oil." He smiled patiently, the way you smile at a child who hasn't remembered the bedtime story. "You missed a step." I tapped the phone on the armrest until he noticed. Then I opened the photos. "Looks like you were counting on me skipping one." Something flitted across his face. First irritation, then calculation. "That's taken out of context," he said. "That's rude." Men talk nonsense. "Men who say, 'let her sit' when their wife can't walk?" I asked. My throat was sore. "Why are you calling me he?" He shrugged. "Autocorrect." I laughed, short and cold, because the alternative was a scream. "Autocorrect doesn't change wife to him, Robert." He looked at my casted legs, as if checking my inventory. Then he pulled the chair closer and sat down. "Listen, you can't live alone anymore. This is serious. I'll handle the paperwork, disability, house, bank. We'll make it all easier, simple, as if I were a form to fill out, as if life could be restructured because gravity obeyed his will." He stood up and looked at his watch, impatient now. "I need to get to the bank before they close." He left without touching me. When the door slammed shut, the house sighed. I unlocked my phone and opened the folder I'd created that morning, a neat stack of screenshots, timestamps, names. Iris had taught me to forward them to a second email address I'd created, one he didn't know existed. I sent them there, then to my sister, then back to myself. The ringing sounded like a heartbeat returning to its normal rhythm. I'm old enough to know that broken bones mend. Trust, maybe not. But even trust leaves traces when it's shattered. I pulled out the small notebook I keep for shopping lists and started a new list. Names, dates, every time he insisted on keeping the pills, every time he said, "Don't worry about the bills." Every time I found the garage door open late at night, the lamp blazing like a stage set. How could the man I married measure my body for a chair and call it love? How long had I been sitting where he wanted me? Iris returned the next day with a thermos of soup and a paper bag. "Before you ask," she said, "the bag is empty. You'll put things in it." "What things?" Every letter he's had you sign this month, whatever he's moved. You won't be able to reach the file cabinet upstairs, so tell me what to look for. I'll fetch. You don't have to." I do, she said, because he lined up a notary for tomorrow. He told Paul on the chat, Monday we lock it down. I don't know what it is, but he sounded very sure. A notary. Power of attorney, I thought, or a deed, or both. I gave Iris instructions. The metal file box in the hall closet, the shoebox labeled Christmas bows that never held a ribbon, the folder stuffed with envelopes from our bank. While she was upstairs, I called my sister June and asked her to listen while I read numbers off the bottom of statements. She wrote them down and said, I'll call the bank manager. I cleaned his mother's house for 15 years. He knows my voice. By evening, I had a picture forming, 2 new accounts, a line of credit against the house I wasn't told about, a letter from an insurance company I didn't recognize offering a home accident benefit with a suspiciously recent effective date. In the margins of my notebook, I drew arrows and underlines like I used to when my son was small, and I followed the steps of a recipe written by hand. At midnight, when the house settled and the refrigerator hummed the way it does when no one is moving, I opened the camera app and scrolled to the day I fell. In the seconds before the paramedics arrived, my husband had snapped another picture. The landing, the first 3 steps, the new sheen on the rail. He had been careful, too careful. The image showed no bottle, no rag. But when I pinched to zoom, the light caught the faintest outline of a circle near the wall where our umbrella stand usually sat. He had moved the stand to hide the ring. A drip mark. I took a screen capture and filed it with the rest. Morning brought the notary, a brisk woman in a navy blazer who looked surprised to find me with my hair combed and my glasses on. My husband stood behind her, smiling like a host who had remembered to chill the wine. Mrs. Hale, the notary said, I'm here to witness your signature on a few documents. We can take it slow. My husband placed the first set of papers on the lapboard he'd attached to my chair. These are just updates, he said. In case of emergencies. Standard, what kind of updates? I asked, though I already knew. Healthcare proxy, he said. Power of attorney. Everyone does it after a big health event. Everyone? I looked at the notary. Do all your clients show up with broken legs and a husband who takes photos before he calls 911? She cleared her throat. Ma'am, I just verify identity and signature. I don't advise I do, said a voice from the entryway. Iris stepped in, holding a plate of muffins like a shield. I advise my friend not to sign anything today. My husband's jaw tightened. This isn't your business. It is if she's being rushed, Iris said, and it is if she's being called him in your group chat. You brought a witness, Robert, so did she. The notary shifted. We can reschedule. We won't, my husband said. He slid the pages closer. Sign, Lydia. I traced the heading of the top document with my finger, durable power of attorney. Under agent, he had written his name, and beneath that the words effective immediately. There was no springing clause, no requirement for 2 doctors. He hadn't even pretended to be cautious. He wanted control now. I lifted the pen and wrote my name in the signature line very slowly. Then I put the pen down and said, not today. He exhaled like a punctured tire. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I said softly. Would you like me to be quiet instead? Is that easier for the paperwork? The notary gathered her files, uncertainty flickering. Perhaps we'll come back. When the door closed behind them, my husband stared at me for a long moment, as if he were deciding which word would get me back in line. Then he smiled. You're tired, he said. We'll try again. I'm tired, I agreed. But not of my own signature. He left for the bank without touching me. Iris sat on the edge of the sofa and put the muffins between us like a treaty. You bought time, she said. I need more than time, I said. I need proof. She nodded. You'll get it. Iris had the practical courage some people confuse with nosiness. She noticed what others missed and wrote it down. That afternoon, she installed a small camera on the bookshelf that faced the staircase, disguised in a vase of eucalyptus I'd kept because it kept its color even after it dried. She set the motion trigger and tested the angle. Then she placed an empty glass jar with a lid on the floor beside the bottom stair. What's that for? I asked. When he tracks oil again, we'll have a sample, she said. You can't lift it, but I can... You think he'll do it again while I'm like this? Abusers repeat what works, she said quietly, but he may try a different tactic. Either way, we'll be ready. That night, I slept poorly, waking at every creak. In the early hours, I heard the garage door open and close. A minute later, footsteps on the stairs. Careful, tiptoeing steps as if the house were eavesdropping. I held my breath. The next morning, the eucalyptus camera showed him kneeling at the top landing, wiping the banister with a cloth, then replacing the cloth in his back pocket. He wore nitrile gloves. He looked into the camera without seeing it. It was the look of a man checking his reflection. He didn't pour oil. He wiped. He erased. He always did cleanup after the show. I texted the clip to Iris, who wrote back, save, cloud drive, print. I did all four. At 10, my sister called. The bank manager flagged your accounts, she said. He can't freeze them without your say-so, but he's watching for any transfers that smell funny. He also printed your last 6 months of statements. I'll bring them by. After lunch, Iris helped me go through the printouts. There was a purchase 3 days before the fall, a large order from a hardware supplier in the next county, another from a medical supply company. When I checked the invoice numbers against the websites, the description chilled me. The hardware store transaction, food-grade mineral oil, the medical supply order, transfer belt, incontinence pads, and a shower chair. He had shopped for my incapacity like it was a season. I stared at the dates until the numbers blurred. Then I circled them. How many times, I asked, did he stand on those stairs and imagine me at the bottom? Iris didn't answer. She didn't say what kindness would have said, that I was overthinking, that accidents happen, that men talk rough. She pointed to the paper instead. This is enough to talk to someone, she said. Not just a lawyer. Someone who knows about families and risk adult protective services, I asked. The words tasted metallic. Or the elder abuse unit at the DA, she said, quietly. You don't have to file a complaint today. You can ask questions I spent the afternoon practicing how to ask. I slipped my phone under the blanket and rehearsed my opening sentence because even strength needs a script sometimes. Then I called a number Iris had taped to a recipe card. The woman who answered had a voice like a school nurse and the patience of stone. Tell me what happened, she said. I did. I told her about the oil and the messages and the notary and the hardware receipts. I told her I was not helpless even if my legs were. I told her I had a camera. Do you feel safe in your home right now? She asked. I feel watched, I said. We can send someone to talk, she said, discreetly. We can also coordinate with the insurance company's special investigations unit if there are claims being filed. He ordered a shower chair before I fell, I said. Does that count? It counts, she said. That evening, my husband was solicitous. He brought me tea and arranged my cardigan around my shoulders and put the remote where I could reach it. He stood with his hands on his hips, looking at me as if I were a project half finished. You know I love you, he said. I looked at his face. I had loved that face for 43 years, through the years it softened and the years it hardened again. Why did you call me him in your messages? I asked. It was a joke, he said. Like we were talking about a patient or a client. Men do that, make things a little impersonal so it doesn't hurt as much. Who were you making it easier for? I asked. You or me? He shook his head, disappointed, as if I'd missed a cue. We need to be a team, he said. You shouldn't be going through our mail with Iris. It's confusing you. I'm not confused, I said. I'm awake. The next day, the doorbell rang at 11. A woman with a leather portfolio introduced herself as a caseworker from Adult Protective Services. She asked if we could speak privately. I said yes. My husband said no. She asked to see where I fell. He said the stairs were being refinished. She asked if I had any concerns about financial control. He laughed and said, she's always been anxious about numbers. I watched her take all that in, eyes calm, pen steady. Thank you for your time, she said. If either of you needs to reach me, my card is here. She left, but not before glancing at the eucalyptus. It was a small glance, but I caught it. If she suspected a camera, she'd be careful with what she said and where. She slipped a sticky note under the plate of muffins with a phone number different from the one on her card and the words, "Call from a friend's phone." I slid it into my notebook. The second hook arrived the next morning at 5:13 a.m. in the form of a notification on my tablet. I had set a keyword alert the night before for my husband's name and the hardware supplier. I didn't expect it to catch anything. It caught an online marketplace listing posted 2 months ago. A man selling nearly full bottles of the same brand of mineral oil. The seller's username was a string of numbers, but the location was our town, and the single photo in the listing showed our garage walls in the background. I would know those pegboards anywhere. Why sell the leftovers unless you were done with the job? I pressed the contact button. The listing had been marked sold. The comments were closed. The grainy photo sat on the page like a smirk. By mid-morning, I had a plan. It wasn't cinematic. It didn't involve dramatic confrontations or shouting in the street. It was a plan made of patience and paper. First, I called my primary doctor and told her I wanted a second fall assessment, not with the orthopedist my husband recommended, but with a physical medicine specialist in the next city. I asked Iris to drive me. On the way out, she unplugged the eucalyptus camera and slipped it into her tote with the casualness of a woman carrying a scarf. We left my husband a note that said, "Back around 3 p.m. The specialist looked at my x-rays, my bruises, my shoes. He asked me to describe the fall in detail. Then he did something no one else had done. He scraped a thin wooden stick across the grooves of a stair tread Iris had carried in from the garage, where I'd insisted on keeping the spare board of wood from our last renovation. The stick came up with a sheen on it that he sniffed and dabbed with a reagent from a small bottle. "Mineral oil fluoresces under this light," he said, and flicked off the overheads. The stick glowed a sickly blue. "You didn't miss a step," he said. "You slid." I asked for it in writing. He gave it to me. Residue consistent with mineral oil, bruise pattern consistent with slip rather than misstep. Second, I called a lawyer, a woman my sister recommended who had a gray streak running like a bolt through her hair and a long memory for tricks. She listened. She asked for the messages. She asked for Iris's screenshots, the invoices, the camera clip, the notary's card. "You don't need to sue," she said. "Not yet. You need to stop him from moving assets, and you need to make sure any agency poking around has the context. I'll file a temporary restraining order on your accounts and a notice of adverse claim on the house. It won't be forever. It will slow him down." "Will it make him angry?" I asked. "He's already angry," she said. "This will make him careful." "That's good for you." Third, I called the number on the sticky note. The caseworker answered with a different name. She told me two things that set my teeth on edge. One, my husband had already called Adult Protective Services himself, claiming he was overwhelmed and hinting that I was stubborn to the point of incompetence. Two, he had asked whether he could apply to be my guardian because I refused to accept the realities of aging. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I cried for exactly 3 minutes and went back to the list. Fourth, I called the insurance company named on the glossy brochure buried under our phone book. I asked for the Special Investigations Unit. The man who came on the line had the quiet voice of someone who spends his days in files. I told him what I had. He asked for the dates. "Why would he do this?" the investigator asked, not unkindly. "Because checks come easier than love," I said, and was surprised to hear my mother's voice in my own. The investigator did not promise outcomes. He promised a visit. "We prefer scheduled," he said, "but sometimes unannounced is more illuminating." I thought of the eucalyptus camera. Try unannounced. Fifth, I wrote my son a letter I didn't yet send. He lives 3 states away and has not been close to his stepfather. I am not proud of how many times I let Robert be the buffer when my son and I were both tired and working and too far apart. I wrote the letter anyway. I did not accuse. I wrote, I fell. "Your stepfather has been saying troubling things. I'm handling it with help. If you want to talk, I would like that. If you feel pulled in 2 directions, choose the direction that faces the truth. I love you." I put the letter under the vase on my nightstand. Some things you send only when you can stand still. When Iris and I returned from the doctor, my husband was in the kitchen with the notary, the doctor he liked, who always talked to him instead of me, and a neighbor I barely knew. He had created his own courtroom. We were worried, he said. He pointed to the chair. Sit. We'll discuss calmly. I'm already sitting, I said. I looked at the doctor. Did you come to examine me? Or to witness my signature? He colored. We're concerned about your judgment, he said. You're refusing care. I asked for a second opinion, I said. I received one. It includes the words mineral oil. Would you like to read it? The doctor shifted. The notary looked suddenly interested in the soles of her shoes. The neighbor glanced at my husband and then toward the door like a man who has wandered into a storm by mistake. We're done here, my husband said, tight. This circus is over. Agreed, I said, and slid the printed report across the table. The show will resume tomorrow at 10. That's when the insurance company will be here. Please be home. He stared. You called them? I invited them, I said. He laughed then, a short, sharp bark. You think an insurance company is on your side? They'll look at you and see liability. They will look at me, I said. And at you. And at the receipts you made the mistake of paying with our joint account. He recovered fast. He always did. I can explain any receipt, he said. I was refilling the cutting boards. Do you want salmonella? On the stairs? Iris asked from the doorway. He glared at her. You've stuck your nose where it doesn't belong. It belongs where my friend's bones are, she said. The next morning, the insurance investigator arrived with another man who didn't introduce himself. They asked permission to photograph the stairs, the hall, the garage. My husband cooperated with the flat brightness of a person trying to pass a test. He opened the garage and said, nothing to hide. The unintroduced man stood silently at the workbench and looked at the pegboard. What's behind there? He asked. Studs, my husband said. Then you won't mind if we look, the man said, and lifted the edge. Behind the pegboard was a small shelf built into the wall that I had never seen. It held 2 bottles, one labeled mineral oil, one unlabeled. Both were half empty. My husband's smile slipped. Those are old, he said. From 2 months ago? The investigator asked, checking the lot code. He wrote something down. They swabbed the lip of the bottle, the grooves in the stairs, the underside of the banister, the rubber soles of the shoes my husband kept on a tray by the garage door. They asked for our phones. I handed mine over. My husband said his was charging in the car. The unintroduced man walked to the driveway and returned with it. Found the charger, he said mildly. My husband's eyes went small. Then he laughed again, overplaying. You people, he said, as if we had all gathered to overreact to a prank. The investigator thanked us for our time and promised follow-up. When they left, my husband's face performed a series of calculations so quickly I could almost hear the clicks. You did this, he said, as if I had orchestrated gravity. I didn't pour oil on the stairs, I said. He stepped closer until his knees bumped mine. He whispered so softly, I felt his breath on my cheek, rather than heard his words. You will regret this. I lifted my phone and pressed record. Say it again, I said at a normal volume. He straightened. I said you'll regret making yourself the enemy. Thank you, I said, and stopped recording. That night, I slept with a chair propped against the door. It wouldn't stop a determined man, but it would slow an impulsive one. I placed the jar near the baseboard where the drip mark had been in the first photo. I thought of all the times I'd leaned over those stairs to scrub. Women keep the places where men do their worst. At 4:42 a.m., the eucalyptus camera, reinstalled, sent a notification. Motion detected. He was on the landing again, wiping. He had always been neat. He cleaned his tools. He cleaned his messes. He forgot that neatness leaves a rhythm. It reveals what you wish to hide. He moved in the same pattern, and the camera knew him now. In the morning, I asked him to make me oatmeal. While he was in the kitchen, I asked Iris to fetch the jar. Its rim showed a gloss. She capped it, labeled it with the date and time, and placed it in her tote. Chain of custody, she murmured. I watched a lot of procedural shows when my husband was sick. It was the only thing that let me sleep. Do you? I asked. Sometimes, she said. It was a small moment, a confession, traded like salt. Then she straightened. We keep going. By afternoon, the lawyer had filed the restraining order on the accounts and a notice at the courthouse that any transfer of the house would be contested. The bank manager called to say my husband had tried to withdraw a cashier's check and had been refused. He had left in a rage. The caseworker texted that the insurance investigator had referred the case to law enforcement. The unintroduced man had been a detective. I remained in the chair, legs elevated, heart steady. Waiting can be action too. At sunset, he returned, carrying a bouquet from the supermarket and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He set the flowers down on the table beside my chair and pulled up a stool so close I could see the tremor in his left eyelid. We can still handle this quietly, he said. You tell your busybody friend to stop snooping. You tell your sister to stay out of our finances. You sign the papers I give you, and I will forgive this performance. What happens if I don't? I asked. Then you will find out how alone you are, he said. I did not rise to the bait. I thought of the letters I had addressed in my mind for years and never mailed, the apologies, the invitations, the questions. I'm less alone than you think, I said. You just can't see the company I keep because they don't flatter you. He stood up too fast, hitting his thigh on the lapboard. The flowers tipped. Water spilled across my blanket. He swore, one of the few times he had used that word in front of me. Then he caught himself. Sorry, he said, a reflex. He lifted the bouquet and shook it over the sink. Leave it, I said. I like the water on my lap. It reminds me I can still feel. He looked at me as if I were speaking a language he had never bothered to learn. The warrant came 2 days later. Not an arrest, a search. They took the bottles from the hidden shelf, the rag from the garage trash, the shoes with the faint sheen on the soles. They took his phone and mine. They asked me if I had the messages Iris had shown me. I handed them a printed stack. They photographed my casts. They asked me to describe his face when I asked about oil. I told them, patient, then annoyed, then calculating. That order seemed to please the detective. It fit a pattern in his mind, and men who collect patterns love when the world aligns. My husband hired a lawyer with a reputation for making trouble go away. He sent me a message through that lawyer that said I was a confused woman manipulated by jealous friends. The lawyer did not repeat the word senile, but it hung in the space between his sentences like a bulb waiting for a pull chain. I answered through my lawyer that I would not be moving out, I would not sign a proxy, and I would not grant him access to any medical records that did not concern him. I sent the same answer to the doctor who had come to witness my signature. He sent back a single line. I regret any misunderstanding. It was the kind of line men send when they have forgotten there is a person on the receiving end. The second opening of my middle act wasn't a scene. It was a call from a woman I didn't know. Her voice was quiet and flat, the way voices get when the person using them is rationing air. Is this Lydia? She asked. You don't know me. My name is Paula. I don't think we've met, I said. No, she said, but your husband knows me. He told me he was leaving you because you were impossible. He told me you fell because you drank. He told me he was heroic. I waited. I believed him, she said. Then I saw the messages. How? I asked. He recycled an old phone for me, she said. He said I could use it for work. I turned it on and it synced. I saw the group chat, the photos, the receipts. I saw the listing where he tried to sell the leftover oil. Why are you calling me? I asked. I kept my voice even. I am not a saint. I felt the sting of her admission. But saints do not survive marriage. Women do. Because he told me he wanted to put his house in my name until your mess was sorted, she said, and because I have a daughter in a wheelchair. I know exactly what it looks like when a home becomes a trap. I closed my eyes. The bouquet water had dried into a stiff map on the blanket. Can you send me what you have? I can do better, she said. I can bring it in person. I'm ready to tell whoever needs to hear it. She arrived the next morning in a raincoat, hair tucked into a scarf, face without makeup. She looked younger than me and older than she should have. She sat in the chair across from me and set the phone on the lapboard like an offering. "I'm sorry," she said. "I knew something was off, and I let the compliments he handed me like candy make me forget to ask why." "You're asking now," I said. She nodded. "I ended it yesterday," she said. "He said I'd regret that. He said he could make it look like I stole from him. He said he had friends." "He does," I said. "Mostly the kind who will fall overboard if the boat shakes." She smiled faintly at that. Then she got to work. She forwarded messages, photos, a list of calls at odd hours, the note where he had written, "She'll sign when she's tired," and the list where he had written, "My bathroom chair belts." The list looked like a shopping note. It was a choreography. The detective took her statement. The investigator took it too. The caseworker made an appointment for her to talk to a counselor who specialized in people who have to confess their own role in small betrayals that add up to something grave. Paula left with Iris's number in her pocket. Women make a web when men cut ropes. My husband fought. He filed for temporary guardianship. The judge denied it politely, with an order that he was to have no access to my accounts and no right to make decisions about my care. He filed a complaint that I was being coerced by a neighbor. The caseworker wrote a report that used the word independent twice and coercion 0 times. He filed a claim with the accident policy anyway. The investigator closed it with a note. I was not allowed to read it, but my lawyer told me it included the word fraud. They charged him with tampering with evidence and insurance fraud first. They moved more slowly on the question underneath. The detective told me the law likes clean lines. He liked them too. His hands were very neat. I went to physical therapy. I learned how to shift in the chair without pinching my skin. I learned to fall safely in case I ever did again. The therapist was a woman with forearms like a rower and a voice that did not accept excuses. She taught me to transfer from chair to bed using a board, and "You're stronger than you think," she said. When I couldn't do the movement she asked for, she rearranged the room instead of insisting I fit it. That felt like love. Summer leaned into fall. The casts came off. My legs were thin and marked like maps. The therapist called them strong. Iris and I installed a ramp at the back entrance that one of the neighborhood men protested about because it changed the look of the property. I told him my legs had changed the look of my life. He could learn to see. When the hearing came for the more serious charges, I did not attend the first day. I stayed home in the chair I had insisted be mine, not his, and watched the sun move across the wall. In the afternoon, my lawyer called to say Paula had spoken clearly and without spite. The hardware store clerk had testified about the oil with the precision of a man who took pride in the labels of things. The doctor who had tried to witness my signature sent a letter instead of testifying. It said nothing and thereby said a lot. On the second day, I went. I wore a dress I'd bought 20 years ago for a school concert and never thrown out, because some fabrics remember better times for you. I rolled into the courtroom with Iris on one side and my sister on the other. My husband looked smaller than he had at the top of the stairs. Men who rehearse control do not look good in rooms where control belongs to no one. The prosecutor did not use the word attempted murder. She used reckless. She used endangerment. She used scheme. The defense called me bitter. The prosecutor called me careful. The judge watched my husband as if taking a measurement he would write down later. When they played the camera clip of him wiping the banister in the middle of the night, Iris squeezed my hand. The room went so quiet, I could hear the small mechanical breath of the projector. My husband rubbed his jaw. He did not look at me. The verdict took 2 hours. The jury found him guilty on the fraud and tampering charges and on reckless endangerment. The judge remanded him and ordered a pre-sentencing report. I went home and slept for 10 hours without waking once. Justice is not an explosion. It is a series of doors opening and closing at the right time. When the sentence came, it was not dramatic. Time in state custody, restitution, an order of protection, mandatory counseling. The insurance company denied his claim. The bank closed the line of credit he had opened and flagged his accounts. He wrote me a letter from the county facility where they kept him while the paperwork shuffled. He wrote, "I never meant to hurt you." He wrote, "You're making a mistake." He wrote, "We could have handled this privately." I wrote back, "I did not mean to be hurt either." I did not send the letter. I put it under the vase with the other one and let the paper keep my anger for me. I sold the hidden bottles with a police release and used the money to pay for the ramp. I donated the shower chair to the clinic, not because I forgave, but because I refused to let tools become monuments. I joined a support group for older women whose families had tried to make their lives smaller than their bodies. We did not trade tragedies, we traded plans. A woman with a son who loved to borrow her car learned how to install a tracker of her own. A woman whose daughter had moved in to help learned how to say no and change the Wi-Fi password. I learned how to laugh without apology. It had been too long. My son came in October. He stood in my doorway with his hands open at his sides like a man who has finally decided to approach. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." I said, You're here." He kneeled and put his forehead against mine, and we breathed at the same pace for a minute, and then we ate the peach pie Iris had brought that morning because she knew what the day would need. He asked me the question I knew he would. "How did you know?" he said. "Not about the oil. About the plan, I didn't," I said. "I knew about myself. I knew I was not a woman who missed a step without noticing the shine. I knew I was not a woman who signs because a man is impatient. I knew patience belongs to me too." He nodded. Then he told me about the times he had signed too quickly in his own life for bosses and girlfriends and landlords. He said he had never thought of patience as a weapon. I smiled. "Tool," I said. "Weapons hurt you when you handle them wrong. Tools make things—" The house changed. I let my sister repaint the hall a clean, bright white that made the morning light look honest. I moved the umbrella stand. I left the eucalyptus where it was, not because I wanted to watch, but because I wanted to remember that seeing is a habit. I put a small rug on the landing that is not slippery and has a pattern my mother would have called cheerful. I planted herbs in boxes at the height of the chair. I learned the names of 3 more neighbor women who had always waved and never stopped long enough to trade numbers. We traded numbers. Sometimes in the late afternoon when the light makes shadows of banisters and chair arms, I let myself think about the version of my life in which the oil was an accident and the messages were jokes and my husband was a man who caught me instead of counting the seconds it would take before help arrived. Then I stop. That life is not mine. Ignoring the truth would only break me where I am newly strong. On the day the restitution check arrived from the court, I wrote a different kind of letter. I wrote to the hardware store clerk, to the caseworker, to the investigator, to the detective, to the lawyer with the gray streak, to Paula. I wrote, "Thank you for looking at me and seeing a person instead of a problem." I wrote, "I am still here." I wrote, "If another woman calls, tell her to start a list." When the first frost came, I wheeled out onto the ramp and watched the breath lift from my mouth. The ramp creaked like an old ship. I put my palm flat on the rail and felt the wood I had chosen for myself. I had not asked permission. I had ordered it with my name on the receipt. It is astonishing how much of life is a receipt. I think sometimes of the line my husband wrote, "Let him sit in the chair." The pronoun still galls. Perhaps he could not bring himself to write her because it would make the image too real. Perhaps he wanted distance in every way a man can want it. Or perhaps he forgot who I am in the practice of reducing me to a task. I am sitting in a chair. It is mine. I decide when to rise. There is a knock at the door. Iris lets herself in and sets down a bag of oranges. She says, "They were on sale," by which she means, "I see you," the way women do when they don't waste words. We drink tea and peel oranges and watch the street. A boy on a skateboard passes and waves without slowing. The sun finds the white paint and makes a bright shape on the floor where the bruise pattern used to be. I put my hand in that light. It is warm. It is easy to feel like warmth is a coincidence, like justice is a favor you lucked into, like survival is a thing that happens to you instead of a thing you do. I know better. He left oil on the stairs. I learned how to test for shine. He built a shelf behind a wall. I asked the right hand to lift the edge. He counted on the chair. I chose the ramp. He filed paperwork. I kept the receipts. He wrote me into a plan. I wrote myself out. If you are reading this and your bones hurt from the weight of someone else's idea of you, start a list. Write the dates. Gather the tiny pieces. Place a jar by the stairs. Ask the neighbor you think is too blunt to help. She is the right one. Call the number on the card and the number on the sticky note. Refuse to sign when simple is the sales pitch. Do it in your voice. Justice did not give me back the stairs. Justice gave me choices. I chose to roll. I chose to heal. I chose to name what happened. I chose to keep the chair and build the ramp and unlock my front door with my own key in my own hand, the one that still shakes sometimes when I am tired and never when I am sure. When the sentence becomes a date on a calendar and the house feels too quiet, I let the clock tick without hurrying it. I am good at waiting now, and I am done waiting for permission. I take my notebook, the one that once held grocery lists and now holds a life, and on the last page, I write a question that used to make me cry and now makes me feel tall inside. How long had I been sitting where he wanted me? Long enough to learn how to stand?
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.